Absolutely.
Good. Okay. So here's why I wanted to intercede, if you will, in this process. And Jack, I presume you can hear, right?
Yeah, I'm right here. I'm just doing my hair.
Okay. Okay. As you know, Vermont was one of the first states that took some initiative on this a dozen years ago, and with Gwen and so forth, and that it was really a terrific effort over many years. And I think it probably reached a very popular crescendo in that period in 2014, where when 20 out of 22 areas, what do they call them?
Counties, maybe?
Counties, perhaps
Yeah.
counties, voted in favor of the legislation to create a public bank, of course, only to be shot down and upended by the replacement. And that actually provoked quite a reaction on our side in PBI. In our world, it was some people saying, well, it's better than nothing, and others were saying this is an outrage, it's not a bank, etc. Both of those points of view are legitimate, and I find myself holding both points of view. Here we are 10 years later. One of the things that is true about this kind of an effort is that, first of all, we recognize that our opposition has enormous strength, and some of it we see, some of it we just know, which comprise the sinews of decision making and power at the State House, and like that. That, of course, is nothing particularly unique, but when it comes up against the will of the people, it creates an automatic and I think important opportunity for the front line to be established that will reposition or at least enable the people to lay claim to some of their rights, which would be in part, which should include controlling their money.
Yeah.
Now, our government is a representative government. The treasurer is our representative to control our money. The legislature, of course, the same thing. And we can certainly give them some credit for moving tens of millions of dollars into an alternative program at VITA and so forth with the Local Investment Advisory Committee, the LIAC, which has been working since 2014, 2015, and doing some good work. Yeah. Yes.
I was under the impression that the 10% program stopped.
Well, the last notes that I saw were taken for a meeting that was done in 2022. In the 2022 legislative session, the Treasurer's Office proposed to the Senate Finance Committee that the legislature expand the membership of that committee to bring diversity in perspective and proposals for LIAC funding. At the same time, the committee moved this year to do an analysis as to the market conditions associated with LIAC dollars. The Treasurer's Office withdrew the request due to the legislative timeline. Now that's, I'm reading from the minutes of the 2022, June 2022 meeting minutes.
Well, sorry to
actually 2021. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I thought. 2021, the last I'm seeing.
Oh.
Yeah, the last meeting I'm seeing here on the LIAC website for the committees is 2021, right?
2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, and so what we see there is some uncertainty, lack of clarity, lack of focus, perhaps.
Yeah.
And then, of course, ultimately a withdrawal of request. So perhaps a half-hearted, maybe not even a fully hearted commitment to get money into the program and for what it was supposed to do.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, Beth Pierce suggested that the discussion that was going on with the representative of VITA would be was part of a larger question about whether the LIAC needs to be retooled given the current environment. Again, that was notes from 2021. And here is another comment from those notes, that there was representing a tug between LIAC's purpose and the risk return standpoint. She said, this person was Ms. Polimus from VITA, I believe, said that it would be helpful as a committee member to have a more comprehensive understanding going forward. So although there have been, although there have not been any other formal request for use of LIAC dollars, she has had several conversations and thinks that we need to take a look at the allowable sectors identified in the legislation. Now, those excerpts that I just gave you indicate a flux, an uncertainty, a lack of clarity, a lack of focus, and also, I think, an opportunity. Because who is going to focus our representatives on what we want if it isn't the people? Because obviously, they're not all that committed to it. It's an optional kind of a thing. I'm not saying they're not committed, although I did just say that. But they are. They do have a conscious commitment to it. Now, I want to bring up something on my other screen here for you, and share my screen. When we talk about what this does, I shared with you a message from Gary Flomanoff about in which he said, well, let's look at this. Okay, you can see this now, right? Here's what Gary said. First of all, he takes a look at the people who are on it. Now, people on an advisory committee are all state agencies. Okay, they're all state agencies from what I can see. It's the state treasurer, housing finance, economic EDA, municipal, and student assistance, so forth. And here's what they fund, Gary Flomanoff reports. Energy efficiency projects in state buildings, is what they did. Homeowner energy loans, landlord rehabilitation, homeowner rehabilitation, etc. 77 loans, 45 million bucks, energy projects, and so forth. Higher education loan cost reduction, and then he says they do exactly what we would want a state bank to do. I take exception to that. That is to say, I disagree with Gary's conclusion that that's all that we want our agency to do. And I'll give you some examples. Now, Gary would argue, and God bless him, he put this together, and that's great, but the general thing. But he says they would do better than the citizen committee to address citizen concerns because the committee is better informed about the needs of the state. That undoubtedly is true. However, what's not included in that list? Let me give you an example of some of the things that might otherwise be included in a public bank list of things that to be considered. Lowering the cost of student debt. There was a little bit of that in the thing we just reported. Affordable student debt for low and medium income, a dedicated thing for that. Purchasing some of that student debt, that's all cool. And I think that's been referenced. But how about microfinance for small business? And one of the gaps that we don't have from our commercial banks. Alternative and inclusive small business lending. a small business missing middle. That's the part of financing where people have money to start a company and they need to grow, but they can't get that middle section of financing to get the mezzanine sort of growth financing. That's something that a public bank could do, and or perhaps even this 10% program. Building capacity for community-based small business lenders and mission-aligned housing development, increasing access to home mortgages, preserving naturally occurring affordable housing. You can read this yourself, but obviously there's more that can be done, a lot more that can be done. These are just some of the things that we're looking at in New Jersey with the New Jersey consultants on how to build and what to include in our proposed state bank. My point here is that this is only a partial list. There's a lot more that could be included. And who would know to include that but the citizens? That it's quite possible then, and following on my email yesterday or the day before, in which I said, I think we need to do both. The why for that is that a couple of things. Strategically, if we go forward with just a public bank and insist that they come up with create a state-based depository that will have the strength and the capability, the capacity to make a difference in the state economy and build a brand new legacy institution, that's a big lift. It's not native to politicians or bureaucrats to do that kind of heavy lifting, but it needs to be done. That is to say, if we want to have a bank, at some point, we're going to have somebody take on that project, some entity to take on that project. Well, and I think what we've seen in the legislature, that it doesn't matter how many people you have behind it, the bank lobby will undo the thing at the end, and we'll be stuck with nothing. So point A is, let's not just work on the public bank, but let's not abandon it. I think that's the golden egg that we want, that the people want to have for the state. That's our goal. Now, how do we get to that goal? Let's use the resources that we have in place, and let's refocus the attention and the concentration of the legislators who are of a mind to get on with this task and utilize some of the tools that we have by expanding and improving the LIAC, for example, to include not just state agencies, but perhaps a more aggressive, well-informed citizen component that will bring some of these other opportunities to the table. And also with that, a willingness on the part of the LIAC, perhaps, to look at ways in which an interim lending mechanism might be devised to be able to provide and to administer and to design service to some of these other targets that I mentioned on this other list. And I'd be happy to send you that list if you'd like, just for a point of reference.
Yes, please do.
Okay, great. And you can make your own, of course.
Yeah.
But in other words, get a citizen agenda underway to partner with the legislature and to build the kind of collaborative partnership that can take very real steps to move some of that money with maybe a stronger commitment into some of these channels by looking at interim, say, what we're calling in New Jersey a bridge entity, a bridge lending entity that would be able to, first of all, have access to the state money with the oversight of the treasurer and the protections and all that stuff, but that would also use the opportunity to build a network of lending support with existing community lenders, with CDFIs, with community banks, and build them into the architecture of a new entity that will be focused on serving the public in a way that the 10% for Vermont has made a start, but realizing that there's a lot more it can be doing. So strategically or politically, kind of the real politic message here is that you have assets that have been demonstrated. You have assets that are established through legislation. You have a history of public equity. The voice of the people have spoken.
Assets that have been identified and assets that have been established. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, the ones that have been identified. Well, we know that the one that they have been established by law. The 10% for Vermont is an established framework. There's a mechanism there, and then of course assets that they put into the state that are already state dollars that have been redeployed. So we have a history that leads us to a new opportunity for the Vermont Public Bank mission or vision. And so from a political strategy standpoint, it's like we want to say, okay, that was a nice start. We're kind of concerned about the ambivalence that the state has shown, that we haven't seen any money in the last year. We don't know. This was a commitment that was made to the people to do this. And not only that, we're at a new point where this state is going to need more control and more ability to leverage its strength and save all of the money that early report did, that Gary did 10 years ago. And I encourage you to really bring that back into prominence. Those studies that wasn't BS. That, X numbers of jobs, X amount of savings over dealing with big banks, etc.
Which study?
That was Gary, the Vermont study that Gary and Danella Meadows.
A new economy.
Well,
yeah,
I think so. It's called Exploring a Public Bank for Vermont. I think was it 2017?
No, it was before that. It
was
2014. 2014, yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
I'll send that with this little list of stuff. Today. Yeah, because when you look at it, you might want to re-up it. You might look at one of the economists at UVT
or Tom Seguros, who I think helped write it with him.
Tom.
I talked to him yesterday. I met with him.
Oh, you did yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So he's so nice.
Oh, he's great. Tom's the best.
So knowledgeable. He's in Rhode Island, Esme, and he consulted with Gary and Gwen during all of the creation of what happened, and he's standing by to consult with us now. We discussed him doing a assessment of like where LIAC is at, where the 10% program is at, and what happened. And so already through this meeting, I'm seeing we have a lot of that already, which is
great.
So you learned about what happened for LIAC?
No, we discussed him like researching it because I was
okay.
Where is it at? Can we just meet with the data and find out what happened, and was it desirable? Do you want the program back?
Absolutely. Yeah. Feel free to loop me in on those conversations. I think that would be important.
Yes. No, if you can get Tom to participate, that's great.
Of course, like he would get paid. And so and I was like, I'm inclined just to like pay you myself and hire you now. And I said, or do I get a C3 or C4 started and start to get donations from foundations and then hire you? And he advised me to not pay him with my own money and to create an organization where there's some funding of some kind so that I'm volunteering my time, but not my like individual money.
Yeah.
For the public banking effort. So that felt good.
Yeah, no, that's great. If you start paying for it yourself, you'll never stop. That's been my experience anyway. But great. So that's great. And I know, of course, Gary, who's living in Brisbane, Australia, but I deal with both of those gentlemen pretty closely. Periodically, I'm involved with a project with Gary elsewhere in American Samoa, now of all things. But anyway, so reviving that, strategizing around having on drawing on the points of equity that you already got organizationally, legislatively, and historically, will, I think, give you a better shot at getting something going. Now, by the way, Tom is exactly the person to engage about the idea of doing what we called here a bridge bank in New Jersey. Let's tell him that we spoke and ask him to.
He is very diplomatically minded, and he's all about where are we now and how can we build on that rather than coming in with something too radical, but not. Yeah, he was exactly where you're at. What do we have going? Yeah. This is how change happens. You start with what you have and build on it.
Yeah, yeah. That's
change theory that he was discussing.
Yeah, excellent. Now,
very common sense.
Yeah, when I mentioned an interim lending or an alternative lending thing, Tom could give you specifics about ways in which the notion of an interim bank facility, a bank-like facility, could be brought in to complement or to articulate the ways in which the LIAC and that money that is set aside could be empowered, because you can leverage you leverage loans out of the capital that you have access to. Tom would be the one who can spell that out for you specifically. Yeah.
Well, do you mind if I ask a quick question about that interim loaning?
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you brought up that New Jersey list of the ideas where there are gaps, because I think it's really helpful to see that concrete list, especially after my discussion with the lead of Vermont Bankers Association, the president.
Mascoma.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris Deal.
What is
it? Chris Deal.
Yeah, exactly. And he really did not see an area where there were any gaps.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then Mascoma saw direct competition anytime I mentioned this, and they were very frustrated with the idea. And so I'm curious, with that list of all those bullet points from the New Jersey banks, would we just provide more money that would be distributed through Mascoma, for example, to do these specific projects, and Mascoma wouldn't have too much skin in the game, but they would just be sort of the employees that were facilitating the.
There are a lot of ways to get money into these the targeted areas. Some of them can be through existing banks and in partnerships with existing banks.
Yeah.
Some of them could be for direct lending that the state might be able to do through its agency. And the agencies, of course, could and I would expect would have a role in helping to facilitate those lending mechanisms. But some of them can be used, some of the needs and targets could be used to expand lending at the local level by sharing risk, by guaranteeing loans or portions thereof. So the whole environment of money flow and management has a lot of options.
Yeah.
So
I guess they so strongly articulated, we don't need it. Like, we don't need help with like sharing risk. We don't need like any sort of backing. Like, that was the overall, like, they just kept hammering that message to me.
But if you ask them to make loans to affordable housing, to affordable housing, or to small business people
they'll say they can't.
Who can't get loans from their bank.
Yeah.
What do you mean there's no gap?
Well,
I gotta really insert. Do you know? I'm like, Liza hasn't made it to this call, but have I yet connected you with Liza Esme? Do you know who
Liza and I know each other actually quite well.
Okay, so you know her study. She just did this study. I think it's her PhD paper about needs, the gaps for access to capital in the state. right?
Perfect.
Yeah, I
Perfect,
guess
perfect,
so.
perfect.
This, I was grateful, but also the fact that I had this particular meeting with Mascoma, which is a certified B corporation. And no, really, I mean, and they say they work closely with Vita. Like they are a community bank. They work, so they say they do a lot of these affordable housing projects. Yeah, so I don't know. I think it would have to be very specific, like to.
Well, I think you've got to qualify
Yeah.
that participation that they do, because there are levels of affordable housing. There's a lot of, Tom will say, there's a lot of money available for affordable housing development, but the people who are in that game, who are developers, are working that line
Yeah.
From a for-profit standpoint.
Yeah.
There are creative alternatives to empowering communities to take care of themselves without the usual gravy train of government financed projects.
Yeah.
That can think creatively and engage different sectors of the economy that do not get bank financing. And the guy is the banker is simply are not willing to look on that side of the tracks.
Yeah.
And it's that side of the tracks where the growth needs to be happening, the concern investment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Jack.
so you think, so if I were to show him that list of the New Jersey sort of gaps, and then maybe as well look at Liza's areas of gaps, if I were to show that list to Chris or to the employees of Mascoma, I wonder if there would be agreement or disagreement about the fact that those exist.
I gotta speak up here. Okay, so what you're talking about is a logical, like the way it would go if everybody was just like minds, processing thoughts, and there weren't emotions involved, and there weren't high stakes with different kinds of loyalties. Okay. So I was warned. I've been studying for a year how to approach this process, and it's like from Walt and from Gwen and from Ricky and from Susan Harmon in California and Mary Beth Gardam in Ohio. I've been hearing from them over and over. The overarching message is there is this speeding train coming at you that is the resistance, and this is not like a simple kind of legislation where you can logically discuss it and move it. It's going to have these totally unexplainable kinds of forces that are coming up against you. So I think, for one thing, I think it's a little bit lamentable, like even that it came up at this Mascoma thing. And so
I very intentionally brought it up, I guess,
Yeah. No, but like this setting where there's a round table and there's lots of people sitting around and all the voices are on that speeding train, and you're just like one that's like, hey, I'm at a public bank, like boom.
Yeah, that was exactly what it was.
To drive you over. And what I really, my vision for Vermont, and because California, the small banks and credit unions became the largest barrier, and they very quickly moved in the way of the public bank movement. And Susan warned me about that. And the reason I met with the Credit Union Association president a few weeks ago, Bergeron, and he said, next person you should talk to is Chris Dealey. And I was like, but there's going to be opposition. He's like, that's exactly why you need to talk to him.
God, yeah.
And all the local banks too. I wanted to really get in a room like one-on-one, or maybe like you, me, Liza, and Shonda, like two young white women and two young black women, just like, hi, we want to talk to you. Like, we're young, but we're cute and powerful, and also and also interested, and also curious, and also we might rally a whole population, but also we want you on our side. We need to do really deep, like, relationship building with these small banks, or this would be my hope, very slowly, one-on-one, like before. And again, like having a bill in right now, it's not that I don't want to go for a public bank, but the reason I had a change of heart with Brian is that I think it's too soon. And even I don't think it's going to get picked up, for one thing, but if it does, it makes it a joke. And then if it does get picked up, I think it would be completely shot down.
Absolutely.
And, I really want to come in the back door.
No, I think that's really smart.
And build relationships with the local banks and credit unions.
Absolutely, because my conversation with them, totally, I mean, I was concerned about the future of being able to build a relationship with them, because they totally, to have them all together versus one, they want nothing to do with me now, like they think I'm very naive. Like literally Chris used the words, "I hope I can enlighten you after this conversation." You know, it was very condescending and then another
Sorry.
legislator
I'm
was in
sorry,
the
by
room.
the way, that you had to be exposed to
Oh,
that.
it's okay. It's fine, thank you. But another legislator was in the room just listening in, and he was like, "Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about," too, after hearing them.
No, it's very
So,
misogynistic
So
and it's
well, he didn't
oppressive.
say that directly, but just sort of the
That
So
attitude.
let me interject something here.
yeah, please.
We understand who the opposition is. We know how they're going to act,
Yeah.
and we know that they are unwilling to be enlightened even in their own interest. But there are facts to deal with here, and Liza's report and the report that we had 10 years ago were facts that have their own compelling logic.
Yeah.
So that when somebody says, "Look, you know what you're talking about," I said, "Well, excuse me.
Yeah.
Where do we have this, and why do we have
Absolutely.
this, and this? Why is it costing us this and this? Why wouldn't you want to stimulate 5,000 or 10,000 new jobs?"
Yeah.
I mean,
That was
so,
the
but I would say, not in an oppositional way, but saying,
yeah.
well, look, explain to me why we shouldn't address these issues. Explain to me why it wouldn't make sense for us to do something that will use what we've got or redeploy what we've got and even enhance what you've got to bring to the table so that we can make this better. We understand everybody's got their favorite dogs, where they're in this race, but but we are in this together, and the facts are the facts, So now, not only that, we've got infrastructure issues here. We've got this and this and this. We've got to address those in a way that doesn't look like taking more taxes and raising more of our debt, as problem solving. What are our tools? We don't have enough tools for what we want. So the case can be made, and I think gracefully, and I think it can be done without alienating them and saying, "You guys are crazy, you know what you're talking about." They obviously do know what they're talking about, but they also are not looking at what we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think the key, like you said, Jackie, it seemed when I went into that conversation, one thing I gained from it is the focus must be that we are not competing with you. And I tried to iterate that it would be a partnership situation, but they said we don't need that partnership. We have enough backing. So I think really putting into numbers and the data, like you said, Walt, just like that was one problem in me entering this conversation without having, sheets of facts and data in front of me and just trying to articulate using these conceptual arguments. I mean, so I had, yeah, I mean, so I think it'll be the combination of emphasizing that it is not why, like using the facts, it would not be a competitive process, and then in a very concrete way, what the collaboration would look like, and then two, like the money, the why, where we'd be saving, where we're missing out on. Yeah, I mean, he made points like, well, we gain interest from saving all our tax dollars in T and D, I believe, or is it T and M? I'm sorry. M&T, sorry. Yeah, M&T now. Yeah.
But we then instead earn that interest from VITA and VSAC and VHSA, right?
I guess that was something that Chris didn't understand and I didn't know how to articulate either, is that VITA or VSAC would be able to pay us for holding money there.
Is that correct, Walt?
Yeah, if you're getting your capital, capital costs money wherever you get it from. The cheapest source of money is deposits, bank deposits.
Yeah.
And if you look at Flummenhoff's report from 2012 or 14, I guess, the one I was mentioning before, he illustrates how much it costs, for how much capital costs, whether it's from deposits or from bank borrowing, bonds, etc. And it's quite a difference. So that if VITA is taking money if VITA is getting money from the state treasurer at 1%. It's probably higher than that now, whatever they're getting, that would be the cost of capital. When Vita takes that money and lends it out at 3% or 4% or 2%, that margin is what Vita has to pay. And yes,
Esme was talking about, Chris talking about the income that we forfeit, the income that we get by depositing our money in M&T.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
yeah.
I think maybe you were also speaking to that point, Walt. And then like, would we be able to compete with, that M&T interest rate from keeping our savings there through like what we would make through Vita or VSAC or whoever? So that's a question I have. And then with the interest rate we pay from taking out loans, are we going to pay more by loaning from M&T versus what we would pay from loaning from?
Is that all in Gary's study? How much we spend and how much we earn by our existing banking?
I don't think so. No.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Oh, it is in there? Sorry.
Yeah, well, hold on for a second. Let me just bring it up.
Well, one reason I also said no is because we changed our banking service recently, right? M&T, like it used to be TD, right?
Right.
Well, plus all the rates changed this year.
Exactly. So nothing
all the time.
So that analysis, for like that's sort of a to-do, like a concrete to-do I would love to get more research on is what are we spending on taking out money versus what we are receiving in interest payments for keeping our money.
I want to know too.
And how, like where, sorry to.
Well, that's okay. And there are also, you can also get the amount of interest that you're paying for bonds. You could theoretically, you could instead of issuing bonds, a state bank could issue credit for infrastructure. Now that's going to be a much bigger bank than you all will be for a long time. But still, it's if you're loaning to yourself, that you set the price, and which could be a savings, and of course it will also be a revenue generator.
Yeah, they argued that like the amount that they're able to set the price, or we would be able to set the price, is it would be the same as what they say, that Mascoma tries to keep things as low as possible, like, and they don't leave much wiggle room for profit, and we wouldn't be able to do the same. Like we don't have much.
Because they think of the cost of capital from a market standpoint of what the market rates are going for. And Vita might be able to get good market rates because you got a great credit rating and so forth. But that's different than creating credit. And when you banks create credit, create money when they make loans. So if you're creating money, you're setting the market. Now, obviously, you have other pressures in framing about what that money's going to cost.
Like the
but
Fed,
it's not going to be what Wall Street says. Even if it's a good deal from Wall Street, that doesn't necessarily determine what it's going to cost you to create your own credit. You know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking for this. I've got a new computer and I'm lost. I can't find my stuff.
Oh.
I hate it. I hate it. But let me see. I might get lucky here. Oh, I know. Maybe.
Just so I don't forget, at some point I would like to talk about, because initially I had told Brian that I want to co-lead sponsor this bill with you, and I am totally in the we're not ready now.
Are you? You're in that same camp?
I am, especially seeing that the local investment advisory committee, that program, there is so much that needs to be done there well, I think we all definitely have the same like intention of what we want and are looking for, but I think directing it correctly will definitely require more collaboration. So I
like deep collaboration and deep learning and deep study like you're doing, where we really look into all the things, where we develop the voice that we need to say the things we need to say and the meetings we need to have. Like it's going to take years, and your engagement is very promising to me. It's
You-
giving me totally new inspiration because I've actually been like confused the last few weeks about like, what do I do? What direction do I go? And
I think we're
you
all
inspire me, Esme. Like, I feel like you and I,
Oh.
you can really keep my momentum up to like have the will to study,
I want to
study. We need to study a lot and like keep understanding it better.
Yeah.
So one of the things you might put on the near-term list
Yeah.
is having a conversation with, is Beth still treasurer?
She is, but and then this
One more week.
one more week.
But that you might start to just open a conversation with them to say, you know, we'd like to know where you're at with the LIAC thing, but also would like to explore some possibilities about areas in which we could see this expanding, and perhaps maybe even doing some reformulation of the committee so that we include some more citizens' voices. That perhaps we can look at bringing in stakeholders, specific stakeholders that perhaps are represented on that list that I showed you earlier.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to, you know, bring.
Wouldn't that be great if we could get her at the table even for a conversation before she goes? You think that's realistic, Walt? And
Well,
you think
no,
she's
I
not
don't
like
think-
too
I
much of
don't-
an enemy?
I think Beth is probably a spent article at this point. You know, her experience is terrific. She's done a great job, apparently.
Yeah.
But I think that the future lies elsewhere, and that someone who's coming into office, if you can have the kind of heart-to-heart or hand-to-hand discussion about possibilities, see what their commitments are, see who they are individually, and see if you can open up the conversation. Say, listen, we've got some game here in Vermont with this money thing. We've done something never done in the country. We've got assets. Well, I mean, there are agencies all over the country, but I don't know of any other state that has used 10% of its available cash, its average cash flow, to invest in the state. So you do have frontier ground that you guys have broken. So, and that's an asset. That's a big asset. Now we can make it more relevant by bringing into it the people of Vermont in a way that doesn't look like starting a whole new banking entity in this to begin with, but it does look like getting on with some of the investment that we'd like to see it happen. You can pick from that list about what you want to focus on, and you can make your own list about what's really needed. Take a look at Liza's report, and I would be inclined to build whatever needs you identify from what Liza says and from what the earlier report said. Use that as the framing for where you could maybe where you could take this LIAC entity and build it into a populist tool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Esme, you've been in touch with Mike. Have you ever met him, the new treasurer?
No, this was something that's on my mind though, and I would really love to enter a conversation with, perhaps I would be, I mean, Walt, I don't know how you feel about that, but I would love to, like, with as many of you as possible.
For sure. I'd be very happy to chime in whenever I could be useful.
Yeah, and then, you know, asking very specifically, what would legislation look like to solidify this improvement in LIAC's workings? Yeah.
Yeah. So remembering that no initiative, no matter how formal it is, it's got to be built on need, on perceived need and opportunity. And so the more you formulate in both from a visionary standpoint, but from a very practical standpoint, we say, you know, we've got these issues here where this whole sector of affordable housing or small business lending or whatever, or infrastructure, it's not being met. And it could mean this amount of jobs and this much and so forth. So we see some opportunities here that the state could take this fund, this program, and move it into something pretty exciting. And we'd like to know what you think, or whether or not that sounds like a viable thing for kicking, you know. Yeah.
I have a question, Walt, for you.
Uh-oh.
So, okay, I talked with the Champlain Housing Trust, and they explained to me that housing is about 2/3 from grants and 1/3 from as a loan to the new homeowner. So it costs about 450 grand for them to build one housing unit, and 300 of that has to come from, isn't that insane? 300 of that has to come from the programs, the federal program, generally the federal programs with the free money that go toward nonprofit low-income housing developers. Yes, follow?
Yeah.
So what I wanted to create was a vision for the public bank where, I mean, there's enough housing needs. It could be exclusively for the purpose of housing Vermonters, at least for the next decade or two.
Sure, yeah.
But they don't just need lending capital. They need revenues. And it had been my impression over the last year, but I've never really understood it from somebody maybe with as much expertise as you, Walt. Will the public bank generate revenues of its own, revenues beyond, say, for example, what we're already earning from our interest on M&T Bank, Esme, like you brought up? Will there be surplus revenues generated from the bank? Are we talking about that we can fill needs for the state that are access to capital needs and income, or just access to capital?
Well, it depends on the scale of the bank, and I think when you're talking on the big terms that you're referring to, you're going to need a very big bank, and you're not going to have that. Certainly not initially, and it will take a while. I mean, you're at a very low level of development at this point. We're just wanting to get this thing off the ground. We've got something off the ground, but it's not. The bank makes money when it sells loans, right? So that's its source of revenue. Now, the Bank of North Dakota, and one of the advantages or aspects of a public bank is that they don't have to make a profit. They don't focus on maximizing profit. They're looking at getting credit into the economy. So the profits and the benefits of that lending looks like economic expansion, economic stability, being able to do other qualitative improvements to the local economy or the state economy, which is different than a money-making bank like a Wall Street bank that will take a flyer. So, but the answer is yes.
Effectively, no.
Well, yes, theoretically, a bank will do that. A well-run bank will definitely create profits. But a public bank is designed to create a sustainable line of credit into various things that it wants. Now, it will create revenue from those loans because the loans are paid back, need to be paid back. That's what keeps it sustainable. So there will be some revenue flow. But it's not, I wouldn't see it as a profit center other than if you're saving many millions of dollars by not paying M&T, for example, I mean, if you're not paying bills to private companies because you're doing the work yourself, that changes kind of like the ecosphere of how the money stays at home.
What do we have to pay M&T to bank with? You mean by banking with them, we have to pay them?
Well, if they're doing, I don't know who's doing your cash management, but there's
undoubtedly loans from them. We have to pay them.
Yeah,
getting the loans from them.
Yeah, that's when we pay them.
Getting the loans, not from depositing our money.
No, they pay us to do that. Yeah.
Right, but if they're managing your cash funds, they're probably charging you something for that.
Well, that's another.
Take this opportunity to plant with you, Esme, just a little seed of one of the main messages I got from Tom yesterday, and also on the call I had with him last week before we scheduled this, just because it seems important. He pointed out that part of our banking that the state does, where we do our check writing and like the financial services heavy part, the part where deposits and all the paperwork, the stuff where like all the state agencies do their payroll out of M&T Bank, and all of that is the last part we want to go after. That stuff, because it's such a high administrative factor, like to transition for our state to do that ourselves should be the last piece we're going after. And that's only 10 to 20% of our cash reserves.
Yeah.
So there's about 400 million, is that right, in the bank on average at a time? Yeah, that's why 40 million is what went out through LIAC.
At least at the time, right?
Yeah, 10% for Vermont. Yeah.
And yeah, like the 100 million of that, we should be happy to leave with M&T for some time, because that's a bigger lift. That's a bigger lift when we start doing all of our own financial services.
Absolutely.
Although financial services can also get outsourced, which most banks do anyway.
No,
But it's that first 300,000, or at least like 100 million of it. 100 million of it would be 25%. Like, I'd really like to see us go from 10% to 25%, because that's 100 million a year. And I'm guessing our bank account doesn't get that close to 100 million. It probably stays up above that. It probably has an average daily balance above 100 million every day. So we could, work with that money.
Yeah. I also, well, I know you were about to say something. I don't know if you want to go first.
well, I was going to go back to that affordable housing thing, only to say that the formula that you laid out, Jack, is one way of approaching affordable housing that looks fairly traditional. At $400,000 for a unit is crazy. But if I've built places, lots of places, but when you go through a programmed process of getting public money for affordable housing, there's that way. And then there are some other ways. There are community land trusts. There are properties that are owned by governments that can be redeployed. There are training and building groups. There's Habitat for Humanity, for example, that is just one example of ways in which building can take place in communities that don't otherwise, can't afford it, but that the state or the municipality could bring in some equity in form of maybe the property itself, maybe just the land, etc. So you kind of re-engineer the way you get the jobs done that you want to create in the process of streamlining or improving weatherization or insulation for houses. Absolutely. You can do training and job employment, and you can do that sort of more comprehensive planning. It's time for this, where we need to think new out of the box about problem solving, ways to do that. And there are a lot of great examples around the country to draw on. They're not, I would say, I wouldn't typically look in the toolbox of the local government and how this is how we do affordable housing. I just think let's talk to some alternative groups. Let's see what they need. Let's see whether or not we could put $500,000 into a community land trust of some sort that would fire up some cooperative participation and build something on a local basis, rather. You know what I'm saying? So
absolutely.
That's tricky though. That's tricky waters then though, because I think the narrative that's safe is to say we want to move some of these funds from the state bank into our existing programs, such as the Vermont Housing, and those are the ones doing housing development in a traditional way.
Well, if you're looking at how you can make the LIAC more relevant and appropriate to today's needs, then I think having a clean slate of paper might be a helpful thing to bring.
And not trying to cater to the local credit unions and banks and be like, don't worry, we're not going to compete with you, and like actually compete with them.
Talk to Tom about the affordable housing thing. I think he'll give you some ideas along that line, I think.
Yeah, I have one question about the practical nature of this 10% program, and maybe you folks know, but so we're saying that we're dedicating, this certain portion of however many thousands, millions of dollars to like VITA, for example, or VSAC. Now, VITA or VSAC, are they storing their funds in M&T as well, or like because it's a state entity? Like, I just don't understand how it's even too much different. Besides, I guess, the fact that we're bolstering them to increase their lending power a bit, and then how are they determining their loan or interest rates in loaning?
VSAC, Vita, they've got to put their money someplace. It's probably M&T,
Yeah,
but and it's because it has to be safely held.
absolutely.
And there are undoubtedly parameters for government depositories, authorized places
Yeah,
that money can be kept. So
yeah.
they're doing that, but they're pricing their money based on based on, first of all, their capital cost, that amount that they can get money from the market or from wherever they're going to get their capital, M&T or from the bond market or whatever. They'll price their lending based on that and their overhead and whatever they think they need to keep the agency afloat, and also risk, the risk factors. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. It just seems, I don't know. I'm just in thinking about how we're going to reform the 10% program. I don't know. That's just something.
Well, how about, maybe not reform, maybe transform.
Transform. Yeah.
Might be a more useful kind of a verb, in that reform looks like it's doing something bad or sounds like that. And rather than characterizing it that way, we talk about the opportunity, the creative
Absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't mean to make it sound like they were doing
no, but
yeah, I totally understand.
But I think words will matter.
They sure do.
Enrolling people, say, here's an opportunity for us, and here's a cool possibility that we could do together.
Yeah.
And we see in this that there's an important role for the community banking group, for community banks in the state and credit unions to participate in program implementation and so forth and so on. That sort of inclusive approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I wonder, what do you think about this is probably dumb, but I'm just trying to think if it's worth it for you to reach out directly to the Mascoma person or Chris, just be like, I wanted to apologize, or I don't know about apologizing, but maybe be just like somehow humbly ask them for a meeting that's like, I realize I have a lot to learn from you. You could play into the enlightenment thing. Like, thank you for helping to start enlighten me. I really want to learn more. I mean, this kind of shit can get a meeting.
But what would that meeting be about? Like,
we would go in and do exactly what we're talking about. Like, what was that 10% program like? How did it work? Was it a detriment? What happened? Did it interface with your bank at all? What if it was revived? Would that be bad or good for you? And if we could get a neutral answer where they're like, oh, that wouldn't be bad or good for us, then it's like, oh, well, would you be willing to sort of like stand behind us? We could find out where they stand on the 10% thing.
I'd like to suggest that if you're going to take on the idea that LIAC could be transformed, or could be a new creative space for improvement and move things in the direction, that you get the kind of group that you've got the two of you, but then you've got Liza, and you've got some other talents. I would bring a financial person in, somebody who is a banker, or has been a banker. If there are plenty of favorable bankers who see the possible, the public mission aspect of their work. And I would think that a working committee, a working task force around thinking through what might be possible. And again, I think, Tom would be excellent to have in there, with the idea of saying, look, we'd like to see LIAC maybe take on a new character, or at least a new characteristic, or a new service application, in which it could actually open up its own little lending arm to reach into some of this list that I showed you earlier, or some other list that would give it something more specific, not just infrastructure, which is what it's been focusing on.
Yeah.
Who does that assessment? Like, who does LIAC itself then make the decision about who does or doesn't get the loans?
Well, somebody requests the money. Yeah, they do, apparently. It's a board that approves what I believe.
So it wouldn't be like consumer. It wouldn't be like a consumer trying to get a mortgage or something like that.
It would all be public. I would imagine all public purpose, public mission, public entities, I suppose, unless there were a private party that was doing public bidding.
And LIAC would like open up an application for lending.
Apparently they have applications.
Organization.
Yeah, no, there haven't been any applications, I think from what we read before. Guys, I need to excuse myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I feel like now I've recorded this.
For next steps, I really do like the idea of meeting with the new treasurer and having a conversation about, especially because the deadline for submitting a bill is so soon. Talking about reforming LIAC. Or sorry, reforming, I'm sorry, I'm never using that word again. Transforming and,
Yeah, that sounds good.
maximizing its potential. So whoever would like to be included on sort of that email
Does that
correspondence.
need to be in a bill though, or can that just start with all these conversations? I mean, LIAC technically still exists, right? Can we just do all that off of the?
You might be right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think all of this conversation, I think, is inside baseball for us, right? And for y'all. It's about strategic planning and thinking through ways that we can make progress. I wouldn't put out the idea that you're on a path to create a public bank until I think, and that's kind of what I was trying to suggest in the email the other day. You can do kind of a subtle subterranean sort of I made an analogy to the Viet Cong.
Oh my God.
They were up against the most powerful military in the world, and they were in tunnels, and working around in ways that were not so visible, but that were eating away at and improve. So all right, I made my point. I think I would do that and develop an understanding and an approach that you all are comfortable with, that has substance, that has a list of the things that these are on our immediate list, and there are more. Here are some people that I think we need to have as partners, strategic partners. They would be social justice, economic justice people and entities. They could be land trusts, co-ops, and so forth. I mean, they're all probably in the group anyway. But there will be individuals in there who and just kind of suss it out. Figure out who's got the kind of financial chops to be able to speak banker speak at some level. Just having one person like that would be a very helpful thing. So
I shouldn't put it on my agenda to be concerned about any type of bill creation. And the only reason I'm just trying to make sure about this is because of the deadline. So So I
agree with that, Walt, that's not a priority this year.
What's the bill thing?
A bill for the 10% to somehow transform LIAC through a bill versus just like a series of conversations that we come in.
Yeah, no, I don't. Well, no, unless you're able to develop a plan. See, it's going to put everybody on notice. They're at it again. And I think that LIAC can be transformed from within.
Yes.
By having a partnering conversation. A business like saying, hey, look, as citizens, we think these things are not covered. I'll bet that LIAC could probably address those, and we could work on that together. We've got some ideas we'd like to share with you, and then start to move it that way.
Excellent. Yeah, great. That answers my question. So I was just worried about next steps and making sure I didn't miss out on any opportunities. So that sounds very good. The conversation with the treasurer will be a really good next step eventually.
Yeah, and you can. I'll send you my little highlighted page of the notes that were made. They're looking. Beth's asking, do we need to re-examine what's included in our list? So she virtually, asked that question.
Spelled it out for us.
She said, Miss Pierce suggested that the discussion was part of a larger question about whether LIAC needs to be retooled given the current environment.
Yeah, those notes, Walt, can you email me whatever that is?
I'll email you both. Along with Gary Fleming
and Gary's thing.
And the New Jersey list. And then I will compile that New Jersey list with Liza's project, maybe.
Well, there's also the list that we had on the bill that Brian and I drafted. We did a list on the first page.
Oh, cool.
The priorities that we were
And by the way, have you guys seen the New Jersey report that one of my colleagues did, Deb Feigart, for a public bank for New Jersey? Similar analysis of looking at the impact of what a bank could do in the economy overall. I'm sorry?
Whose was it? Whose analysis?
It was somebody, Dr. Deb Feigart from Stockton University. I'll send that along as well.
Great.
Okay.
I cannot thank you all enough for your time. So appreciate us being able to hash it out. Yes, it means a lot to be able to think through these things with you.
Esme and Jack, thank you for taking this on and for being willing to be champions and lead and to be on it. So thanks. This is how shit gets done.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Walt. Yes.
Talk to you all in the new year, probably. Or reach out sooner, Esme. I'm all geared up. So
absolutely, I love it.
In the next couple of weeks or anytime you're ready.
We're here available. Kimbria, thank you for being with us today.
Kimbria, so much.
Absolutely.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Oh,
Bye.
absolutely. Bye-bye.